Chapter 1655. As the Dharma Supreme left, soft puffing sounds could be heard in the air. Following the direction where the Dharma Supreme left, droplets of water fell from the sky, sparkling under the sunlight and dripping into the soil. Everyone knew that these were the Dharma Supreme's tears. It was obvious that this generation's think tank could no longer control his emotions. Even when he was flying at such a high speed, there were still so many tears falling. Everyone looked at one another, all of them speechless. No one stopped him. No one thought of stopping him. Why does he refuse to turn back when he already knows the truth? GMO said somewhat angrily. Since he knows that he was wrong and understands that what happened back then was a misunderstanding, why doesn't he turn back? Is selfish desire really that important? Don't his brothers from back then miss him? If he doesn't turn back, how can his brothers endure it? Turn back? How can he turn back? How can he turn back? Gu Duxing said coldly, law enforcement officers, heroes from all walks of life who once ruled the world, and whose names shook the heavens, have basically all been destroyed in his hands. He has completely destroyed the foundation of the law enforcement officers. The entire heavens continent will be plunged into an eternal land of chaos because of his actions this time. Although the law enforcement officers have been somewhat corrupted over the years because of the Dharma Supreme, without the restrictions of the law enforcement officers, this continent will be 10,000 times more chaotic than before, or even more. Even if he repents and turns back now, it will be of no use. The impact he has caused has already become a foregone conclusion. Even if he changes his mind at the last minute, it will no longer be of much significance. On the contrary, it may cause even greater and more lasting trouble. Gu Duxing sighed deeply. In fact, a hero and wise man like the Dharma Supreme naturally has his own thoughts. If he continues to persist in his wrong ways, it may be true repentance. If he were to repent at this moment and commit suicide to atone for his sins, then the entire world would truly be finished. What exactly are you talking about? Why don't I understand? Whatever. What do you think we should do next? Luo Kadi was completely perplexed. Do we still have to fight to the death in the future? Chu Yang coughed and said, Of course, the Dharma Supreme said it very clearly just now. It's one thing for him to know that he was wrong, but he can no longer turn back, so the battle still has to continue. If he could kill us, he wouldn't show any mercy, and vice versa. Therefore, the road ahead was still bumpy. The road is still filled with blood. Everyone still needs to work hard. GMO Luo Kadi, and the others were still somewhat confused. However, what was in common was that for a hero like the Dharma Supreme, one of the legendary tribulations of the past, to end up in such a situation today, everyone could only sigh and lament in their hearts. Fortunately, it was the Dharma Supreme who encountered such an incident. I'm afraid that the only choice I would have had would have been to destroy my body and soul as soon as possible. Xia Danqiong rejoiced and said. All the brothers heard Xia Danqiong's words. He thought of all the things that the Dharma Supreme had gone through. When they thought about what would happen to them, they couldn't help but shudder. He nodded in agreement. If he continued to live like this, it would be a fate worse than death. Let's go back. A war is inevitable. So let's go all out. Chu Yang said. Mo Qinggu scooped Chu Yang up in her arms. Hugging Chu Yang's tall and majestic body seemed very out of place, but she refused to let go even if she had to die. She just carefully held on to him. The brothers left step by step. After walking for a long distance, they still couldn't help but turn back. The Dharma Supreme's helpless and sorrowful roar, before he left, still seemed to reverberate. Wu Jueqing was the last to leave. He stood despondently for a long time before he said softly, Diwu Chochang, thank you. He was referring to the Dharma Supreme's sneak attack on him back then. He used to hate his sneak attack so much, but now, he realized that if it wasn't for that sneak attack and his serious injuries, he probably wouldn't be much stronger than the Dharma Supreme right now. The wonders of the world were simply unimaginable. On the other side, the Dharma Supreme sped all the way back to the secret gathering place of the law enforcement officers. It was just that the journey was very peaceful, very peaceful. If it was before, the Dharma Supreme would definitely be thinking about many things, such as plotting against whom, or how to improve his cultivation, or The reason why it was peaceful was because the Dharma Supreme's mind was completely blank at this moment. Or rather, it wasn't appropriate to say that it was completely blank. Because in the bottom of the Dharma Supreme's heart, there was always a thunderous voice calling out to him. Cho-chang, 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 what do you think of this place? Cho-chang, what do you think? Cho-chang, where are you? Fifth brother, where are you now? Fifth brother, why aren't you here yet? Fifth brother, everyone is waiting for you. Fifth brother, how are you now? Fifth brother, come back quickly. The voices of his brothers seemed to be constantly ringing. The Dharma Supreme howled and covered his face as he ran. He covered his face tightly. The Dharma Supreme covered his face and ran while choking with sobs. The faces of his brothers flashed before his eyes. Some of their faces, after tens of thousands of years, had been blurred, but now, they were incomparably clear. Even the expressions on their faces were the same as before. They were calling for me, they were calling for me. But I could only cover my face and run. I miss all of you too, but I can't, I'm no longer worthy. The Dharma Supreme ran against the wind, forcibly suppressing the endless bitterness in his heart. But he still felt waves of choking and indescribable sobs. The whistling wind that came towards him had already dried up the tears that had just overflowed from his eyes. He didn't know what he was thinking in his heart. He only felt that his heart was suddenly burning like a ball of fire, and then suddenly cold like ice. If tragedy is inevitable in life, then what is my life? Is it considered a tragedy, or is it a farce? A farce that I directed and acted in myself, thinking that I was infallible and doing things on my own, messing up everything. I thought that everyone owed me, but in the end, I was the biggest debtor. No matter who it is, I owe it to them. The Dharma Supreme suddenly felt an extremely absurd feeling. For a moment, he actually wanted to laugh at the sky, shout at the sky, or curse at the sky, complain that the heavens were playing tricks on him, that the heavens were unfair. For a moment, it was as if he wanted to kill everyone in the world, leaving nothing behind. All living beings were exterminated, and for a moment, they wanted to destroy themselves, their souls scattered, consigned to eternal damnation. So everything was actually a mistake. So the one who made the most mistakes was actually myself, selfish from the start. Then, blinded by greed, I fell deeper and deeper, to the point where the heavens and earth can no longer tolerate it, and there is no way back. Full of regret, full of bitterness, unable to retreat, unable to advance. Diwu Cho-chang, where should I go from here? Diwu Cho-chang, you were once revered by the world, and a hero that everyone looked up to. You also had a place in the legends of the heavenly realm. You had the reputation of tribulation throughout history. You also had your glory, overturning the heavenly realm tens of thousands of years ago. As tribulation's think tank, you led the entire situation, and it was only because of your planning that the brothers could unite the heavenly realm that time. Now what have you become? The Dharma Supreme of today? Are you still the Diwu Cho-chang of the past? Are you still the Tribulation's think tank? Diwu Cho-chang? Dharma Supreme? Tribulation's think tank? Heavenly Demon Seed? Hero? Devil? Troublemaker? Where should I go from here? Where should I go from here? Where should I go from here? The Dharma Supreme felt that his heart was about to explode. The Dharma Supreme suddenly stopped outside the forest, looking up at the sky, speechless, his face full of confusion. He really couldn't retreat, neither could he advance for a moment. He couldn't make a choice, and there was no way forward. For a moment he couldn't advance or retreat. Lord Dharma Supreme. The two law enforcement experts who were on guard outside the forest came out of hiding and bowed. The Dharma Supreme took a deep breath and exhaled gently. He quickly restrained his emotions and said indifferently, "That person, has he returned?" The two guards said, "He has already returned, but he seems to be very badly injured. Now he is sending people everywhere to look for Lord Dharma Supreme." The Dharma Supreme's expression was neither happy nor angry, and only nodded indifferently. "I know." He floated and entered the dense forest. The moment he entered, he could clearly feel a wave of scattered demonic aura, faintly rising and overflowing, with a vague feeling that it would dissipate at any time. This feeling was very strange. Even when he first met the heavenly demon, he didn't seem to be in such a miserable state. It seemed that the heavenly demon's injuries this time were indeed extremely serious, enough to be fatal. Even more so than that day. The Dharma Supreme walked over with a gloomy face. One after another, weak moans that were forcefully suppressed came out from inside almost continuously. Just by hearing these sounds, one could imagine how much pain the person who was moaning was in. You are back. You are finally back. The heavenly demon's voice was extremely weak. Come over quickly, come over quickly. The Dharma Supreme's eyes flashed, and his figure disappeared. He instantly entered the house, and turned a corner on the wall. Immediately, the door to a secret chamber appeared. The Dharma Supreme entered in a flash. The wall behind him slowly closed up. Hurry! The heavenly demon withered in the secret chamber. His whole body almost shriveled up. Demonic aura constantly flowed out from his body, and disappeared into the air. As the demonic aura gradually flowed out, his aura became even weaker. Now he was like a candle in the wind, on the verge of death, and could die at any time. Previously, he was seriously injured, and was also poisoned by the unique poison in the world. Now, the heavenly demon really didn't even have the strength to move. It was already very lucky to be able to return here. If not for the Dharma Supreme, his last hope, he could only wait for death. Hurry, prepare a few embryonic devil souls of supreme martial artists and above, the more the better. Don't be too strong, just second or third grade supreme martial artist embryonic devil souls to strengthen my foundation. The heavenly demon said weakly. If I don't get replenishment soon, I will vanish into thin air. Hurry up and prepare them, hurry. With your strength, how did you get injured so badly? The Dharma Supreme frowned and asked slowly. Chapter 1656. All kinds of weird things can happen in this damned place. It's my bad luck. I met the Demon King the moment I made my move. The heavenly demon gritted his teeth in hatred. It was originally nothing much. I just had to hold on a little longer, and I would have won the battle, and even gotten the rare supreme demon body. But for some reason, a strange sword came and ruined my plans. Then I met two experts who could use the Heaven's Peak poison. Why are you still asking about this at this juncture? Hurry up and prepare. The faster the better, hurry up. You're so badly injured. What kind of spirit would be the best for you? Do you want the spirit of a second grade or third grade supreme martial artist? Do you need a special catalyst? The Dharma Supreme was a little anxious, but his words were clear, and he asked in great detail. No need. Just a second grade or third grade one will do. Hurry up and prepare. Cut the crap. So just an ordinary one will do. Yes. Hurry up and prepare. The faster the better. But sir, you also know that the ones we demonized previously were all high-level martial artists, such as the second grade and third grade supreme martial artists. I didn't put in much effort, but I realized that I couldn't completely control their spirits. This is a little troublesome. If an accident happens when you're replenishing them, why are you so silly? What's the big deal? You just have to do this and that. Oh, I see. Sir's words are very righteous and I've benefited a lot. All right, when I went out today my spirit was also injured, and I realized that I couldn't completely control it. Does this have anything to do with the strength of my spirit? Of course it has something to do with it. Why do you have so much to say? Hurry up and prepare. For example, I can't control anyone now. This is all related to the brand of the devil soul. The weaker the devil soul, the lower the control. If the devil soul is on the verge of collapse, the brand can't be maintained. Hurry up and go. Hurry up and prepare. Oh, I see. Sir, you're really honest. I've figured it all out. What? What do you mean? The heavenly demon finally felt that something was wrong. The Dharma Supreme laughed coldly. I'm just saying that you're really fucking honest as a pig. A pig waiting to be slaughtered. The heavenly demon was stunned for a moment before it reacted. It let out a shrill cry. How dare you say that about me? Up until now he had felt that something was wrong. Yet, he still did not suspect the Dharma Supreme. The Dharma Supreme stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression gentle and refined as usual. Yet he said, Don't you understand what I'm saying? Don't you understand human language? You're a demon. So it's reasonable that you don't understand human language. I'll say one more thing. Fuck you. Do you understand? Can you? The heavenly demon was so infuriated that the demonic aura all over his body was about to explode. Panting heavily, he looked at the Dharma Supreme and said, "You scoundrel! Demon child, you actually! How dare I scold you?" The Dharma Supreme smiled. "Not only do I want to scold you, I want to hit you. Don't worry, I'll fuck you. But you are definitely not my demon child." As he spoke, he slapped the extraterrestrial demon hard in the face. The sound was exceptionally crisp and clear. I want you to die." The heavenly demon was mad with anger. Completely disregarding his injuries, he tried his best to activate the demonic soul brand. The Dharma Supreme frowned and instantly felt an extreme pain exploding in his mind. However, this pain was not as unbearable as before. In fact, the pleasure was gradually diminishing. Looks like the extraterrestrial demon is really honest. What he said was absolutely right. This was the final radiance of the setting sun, and there was nothing he could do anymore. His demonic soul had obviously suffered great damage. After this, he would no longer be able to control himself. He couldn't help but feel relieved that he had gotten rid of this last burden. No matter what he chose in the future, he would be able to do as he pleased. The Dharma Supreme confirmed his judgment. Completely disregarding the fact that the extraterrestrial demon was still activating his demonic soul, he slapped the extraterrestrial demon's face more than 10 times consecutively. He growled, "You control me? You control me?" Every time he slapped her, he would ask her a question. The pain in his mind continued, but his hands did not stop slapping. "You control me? Who do you think you are? You actually want to control me? You're a demon child that deserves to be cut into pieces. You're a demon who deserves to die. You've schemed well, you've harmed me well. You bastard who deserves to die 10,000 times." Slap after slap. The pain in the Dharma Supreme's mind continued. The extraterrestrial demon's final counterattack was no small matter. But the Dharma Supreme did not show it on his face. At this moment, he could only humiliate the extraterrestrial demon as much as he could. Drops of black demonic blood flowed out from the extraterrestrial demon's mouth, and wounds almost continuously, turning into drops of demonic energy and dissipating in the air. The extraterrestrial demon was extremely aggrieved and indignant, but also extremely aggrieved. He glared at the Dharma Supreme, wishing he could swallow him whole. He would never have thought that when he returned here, he thought that it was his fledgling that healed him. Who would have thought that this fellow would actually betray him? This change made the extraterrestrial demon feel like he was dreaming. How could it be possible that the fledgling that he had manipulated with his own hands actually betrayed him? Their choice should be similar to yours, to try their best to make up for it. However, they would still try to find us. If it were Dong Wuxiang and Rui Butong, they would probably not do anything. They would just commit suicide. Not facing all this is the simplest and least painful way. As for GMO and Luokadi, they would not choose to commit suicide. However, if they end up like the Dharma Supreme, going crazy would be their only outcome. Lastly, it's me. Mo Tianji was deep in thought. My choice from the start would probably be the same as the Dharma Supremes. Step by step, the changes would be similar. Even the final outcome. I'm afraid I would also choose the Dharma Supreme's current method. We are all people who use our brains to make a living. Our thinking is really similar. Mo Tianji shook his head and smiled bitterly. In the end, the Dharma Supreme and I are ultimately the same type of people. It's just that I am luckier than him, much luckier. At least, I don't have to make that kind of damn choice. Chu Yang heaved a long sigh of relief. He did not open his mouth to speak, but deep down, he agreed with Mo Tianji. Thinking back to his previous life, Mo Tianji had taken revenge on him for Mo Qinggu. That was really a means of death. If one were to look at the root of it, how was it different from what the Dharma Supreme was doing now? Therefore, the Dharma Supreme is still a man in his bones. It's just that his lust for power has blinded his eyes and corrupted a hero, Mo Tianji concluded. Chu Yang nodded. Yes, it's indeed a pity, but he still has to die in the end. Yes, we must kill him. Mo Tianji was also a little disappointed. Only by dying in our hands can the Dharma Supreme be truly free. This is no longer a trick of the heavens, but a change in the situation. Only by dying can he resolve all the disputes and changes before him. Only by dying in our hands can he truly be free. The two of them looked at each other and saw the complex emotions in each other's eyes. Making friends throughout one's life. If one can find a friend like the Dharma Supreme, it's actually also a kind of luck. Great luck. Chu Yang stood up and walked slowly to the window, saying slowly, "Yes, what's wrong with sacrificing the whole world to avenge your brother? What's wrong with slaughtering the common people?" Mo Tianji's voice was full of praise. Vicious and merciless, unscrupulous in order to achieve his goal. Evil as the mountains, evil as the seas. What a man of character. We often say such things and think such things. That's why it's loyalty. Mo Tianji's tone was a little sad. But the Dharma Supreme really did it. So it became a sin. Times change, that's all there is to it. Chu Yang nodded slowly. When Chu Yang and the others returned to their lodgings, Mo Tianji, who was the only one left behind, was already anxiously waiting for them. If Du Xing had reached the final step of the Dharma Supreme, he would have simply retired and disappeared without a trace. He would have been alone for a lifetime. If it were Xie Danqiong and Ao Xieyan, they would have tried their best to survive. Their choice should be similar to yours, to try their best to make up for it. However, they would still try to find us. If it were Dong Wuxiang and Rui Butong, they probably wouldn't have done anything. They would have simply committed suicide. Not facing all this is the simplest and least painful way. As for GMO and Luokadi, they wouldn't have chosen suicide. However, if they ended up like the Dharma Supreme, going crazy would be their only outcome. Lastly, it's me. Mo Tianji was deep in thought. My initial choice would probably be the same as the Dharma Supremes. Step by step, the changes would be similar. Even the final outcome. I'm afraid I would also choose what the Dharma Supreme is doing now. We are all people who use our brains to make a living. Our thinking is really similar. Mo Tianji shook his head and smiled bitterly. In the end, the Dharma Supreme and I are ultimately the same type of people. It's just that I am luckier than him, much luckier. At least, I don't have to make that kind of damn choice. Chu Yang heaved a long sigh of relief. He didn't speak, but he agreed with Mo Tianji endlessly. Thinking back to his previous life, Mo Tianji had taken revenge on him for Mo Qinggu. That was really a means of death. If one were to look at the root of it, how was it different from what the Dharma Supreme was doing now? Therefore, the Dharma Supreme is still a man in his bones. It's just that his lust for power has blinded his eyes and corrupted a hero. Mo Tianji concluded. Chu Yang nodded. Yes, it's indeed a pity. But he still has to die in the end. Yes, we must kill him. Mo Tianji was also a little disappointed. Only by dying in our hands can the Dharma Supreme be truly free. This is no longer a trick of the heavens, but a change in the situation. Only by dying can he resolve all the disputes and changes before him. Only by dying in our hands can he truly be free. The two of them looked at each other and saw the complex emotions in each other's eyes. Making friends throughout one's life. If one can find a friend like the Dharma Supreme, it's actually also a kind of luck. Chu Yang stood up and slowly walked to the window. He then said slowly, "Yes, what's wrong with sacrificing the world to avenge one's brother? What's wrong with slaughtering the common people?" Mo Tianji's voice was full of praise. Vicious and merciless, unscrupulous in order to achieve one's goal. Evil as the mountain, evil as the sea. What a man of character. We often say such things and think such things. That's why it's a code of brotherhood. Mo Tianji's tone was a little sentimental. But the Dharma Supreme really did it. And it became a sin. Changes in the situation are nothing more than this. Chu Yang nodded slowly. However, the law enforcement officers who were continuously supporting them from all directions had also begun to gather there. The situation wasn't optimistic. The Ling family. The enforcers used a huge amount of explosives to detonate under the ice peak. Half of the Ling family's ice peak and snow mountain collapsed overnight. There were countless casualties. Home attacked. Their forces were greatly reduced, and they were in a stalemate. Zhuge family sealed. They were attacked and suffered a large number of casualties. Being attacked. Confrontation. The news that came from all directions was that they had been attacked, that there had been a large number of casualties, and that sort of negative news. The law enforcement officers had formed a huge foundation over the past 10,000 years. Last night, it was actually detonated in such a direct and unscrupulous manner. Furthermore, it was an all-around explosion that was close to indiscriminate. In these 10,000 years, how many people were there in total? This was an uncountable number. If it's only about distributing the world, then it's at the headquarters of the Great Hall. There were at least 300 branch halls, and under each branch hall, there were more than 10 branch halls. There were at least 40 to 50 people in each branch. There were about 1,000 people in each branch. In this way, there would be at least 300,000 law enforcement officers in each branch. And this was the most conservative figure that was obtained purely through calculation. There were as many as such branches under the law enforcement officers. Apart from that, there were also the various branches in the law enforcement officers' headquarters. The most conservative estimate was that there were at least 4 million people in the law enforcement officers' forces. This didn't include the hidden forces on the law enforcement officers' side, such as the Bloodpayers' Hall. The forces under the Bloodpayers' Hall were all wanderers in the pugilistic world. There were hundreds of thousands of them, and all of them were experts. When they gathered together to receive an emergency mission, they were even more desperados among desperados. In just one night, the entire continent had undergone an earth-shattering change. A rough estimate was that in just one night, the number of casualties on both sides would be at least more than 1 million. In the secret chamber, the faces of Yi Chunshan and the others were as pale as ashes. The Dharma Supreme is definitely crazy this time. Ling Muiyang took a deep breath. His eyes flashed and his expression was cold. Is there a mistake somewhere? How did things suddenly develop to this stage? The Dharma Supreme has always been scheming and astute. By doing this, the losses outweigh the gains. Did something go wrong somewhere? We've reached the ancestral spirit river. Chu Yang sighed. He and Di Wuqing rose streaked across the sky like meteors and landed on a big protruding rock on the riverbank. Below, the turbid waves surged to the heavens. The river flowed from the west and rolled towards the east. If it was an ordinary person, they would feel dizzy just by looking at it. If he was a little timid, he might be scared out of his wits. The ancestral spirit river is now muddy. Di Wuqing gazed deeply at the river below and couldn't help but sigh. You're wrong, Chu Yang said softly. It's not that the ancestral spirit river has become muddy. Instead, someone had made the ancestral spirit river murky. One is a natural disaster, and the other is a monster. They can't be compared. At this moment, the river suddenly stirred up another wave. The water surged up to a height of over 100 feet, and the splashes were like a big screen. Under the sunlight, the splashes reflected a magnificent brilliance. It was extremely dazzling. This is... Di Wuqing's eyes flashed with extreme shock. He clearly saw that the surging river was accompanied by an extremely dense blood color. He didn't notice it when they were on the river, but once it was stirred up, the faint blood-red color was undoubtedly revealed. If it wasn't blood-red, how could it be dazzling? Yes, it's blood. It's blood. Chu Yang's eyes were filled with pain. This ancestral spirit river, the source of life beneath the heavy heavens, has now become a river of blood, a river dyed red by blood. A river of blood, Chu Yang said with a heavy tone. Even with Di Wuqing's calm temperament, he couldn't help but gasp. I can also confirm that there weren't any large-scale deaths within 1,000 miles. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Di Wuqing's eyes were filled with shock. The hidden meaning of Chu Yang's words was too shocking, enough to make most people's hair stand on end. If there weren't any large-scale deaths within 1,000 miles, it meant that the current blood color of the river actually came from 1,000 miles away. After 1,000 miles of water change, it could still show such a bloody color. Then, how many people had died upstream? How could it have reached such a state? The two of them stared intently at the rolling river water. They saw that not long after, there were many pieces of things flowing down from above. Some of them reached the riverside and were caught by the grass and puddles by the riverside. Some of them floated and fell into the whirlpool and were sucked into the bottom of the river. But there were still many that floated down. They were some incomplete corpses, or rather the fragments of corpses. According to my estimation, after this incident, the survival rate of high-level heavenly layer martial artists is definitely less than 1% of the original peak. Or even less. Chu Yang sighed. This is a catastrophe for heavenly layer martial artists. And it's a catastrophe that we have no choice but to participate in. Mo Tianji's expression was heavy as he smiled bitterly. If we don't try our best to stop it, after the Dharma Supreme has killed all the people he wants to kill, he will still come to us for a battle to the death. If we stop it, it may be what the Dharma Supreme wants. He doesn't want the force of the law enforcement officers to continue existing. Once we take action, we will be participating in the killing. And no matter how many we kill, the Dharma Supreme won't care. He will only follow his set goal and original plan, all the way until there is no one around him that he can use, and his own people are all dead. Or, all the people he wants to kill are all dead. This is a dead end. No matter which way we go, it's a dead end. No matter what we do, the final result is that the Dharma Supreme's actions this time will be a complete cleansing of the entire world. And we have no choice but to participate and stop it. Even though this is a futile effort, we still have to work hard in vain. These three men, who were already standing at the peak of the upper three heavens, and even the entire heavenly layer, sat together and had a headache. It had to be said that under the sky, something that could cause such a headache to the three of them should not exist. Logically speaking, it should not appear. It did not seem to exist at all. But now, the Dharma Supreme didn't use any profound wisdom at all. He only used the most barbaric and primitive method of suppression. A normal person in power would definitely not use such a crazy tactic. It was beyond the level of harming the enemy by 1,000 and harming 800 of his own people. If it wasn't for the fact that the law enforcement officers were extremely powerful, the casualty rate would definitely be reduced. This was because the law enforcement officers were almost equivalent to making the entire upper three heavens and all the aristocratic families their enemy. This extremely simple yet extremely brutal tactic made the three of them completely helpless. Join the battle? The first question to consider was actually who to help. From a moral point of view, they should help the big clans. However, a considerable part of the reason why the Dharma Supreme started the battle to destroy the world was to facilitate Tribulation's reorganization of the forces and order. At this juncture, if Tribulation were to help the big clans instead, he wouldn't be able to accept it psychologically. Chapter 1661. Furthermore, although the strength of the brothers had already reached the peak of the heavenly layer, in terms of prestige and power, they were still not enough. Even their actions were not enough. Then, to help the Dharma Supreme deal with the big clans and hasten the end of the catastrophe, that was even more impossible. No matter what the Dharma Supreme's current motive was, or what his stance was, his identity as the successor of the heavenly demon had already defined him. Not to mention, after the big clans were annihilated, there was still the final battle with the Dharma Supreme. To help the enemy deal with their own allies, and then fight the enemy, wasn't that foolish? All in all, they were in a dilemma. In such a situation, what should we do? If Chu Yang wasn't beside him, even he himself wouldn't believe that the words "what should we do" would actually come out of Diwu Qingrou's mouth. Almost the wisest person in the world would actually ask the words "what should we do" to someone else. Mo Tianji laughed bitterly. The best way to stop an action is to target the weakness. If the Dharma Supreme still has any misgivings or weaknesses, then no matter what, we can use targeted strategies to stop him. But now, he doesn't care about anything. This is the real problem that is hard to solve. As the saying goes, one can be strong without desires. It's hard to deal with. Chu Yang stared at the endless stream of corpses floating over the river surface. He said softly, "Duxing and the rest are now trying to contact the law enforcement officers to clarify the facts and set things right. However, the Dharma Supreme is the longest-serving Dharma Supreme in the history of law enforcement officers. He is the most capable and has the highest prestige. He is also the one who is the most united. For the time being, no one will listen to us at all. This is also a headache. Not only that. In fact, it's not just Duxing and the rest. As long as anyone speaks ill of the Dharma Supreme, the law enforcement officers will immediately fight you to the death. Playing with your life. Mo Tianji laughed bitterly. Even if you produce evidence, you will be forcefully overthrown. The law enforcement officers will not allow anyone to speak ill of the Dharma Supreme. The Dharma Supreme's orders are the supreme orders. Once he says it, the law will follow. Orders will be strictly enforced. Nothing more than that. Diwu Qingru frowned, and then laughed bitterly again. He sighed. I have to admit that one person, to be able to have such prestige, one can really be considered to have reached the peak of one's life. I don't know if there will be a day when I will be like the Dharma Supreme. I believe that this achievement is definitely the dream of any person in power. For the Dharma Supreme to be able to achieve what he has today, it is also due to his painstaking efforts over the past 10,000 years. It is truly not easy to come by. Chapter 1662. Just now, Diwu Qingru and Mo Tianji's minds were constantly circling, calculating the Dharma Supreme's crazy move this time, thinking about how to break the situation and how to break the plan. The more they thought about it, the more helpless they were. Because no matter what they did, the result was exactly what the Dharma Supreme wanted to see. Any reaction would only speed up the process of the apocalypse. Therefore, the two of them were already somewhat depressed, even lost. This was perhaps the common problem of people who were good at scheming and scheming. Once they realized that the other party's strategy could not break the situation, they would think of giving up. This round was destined to be a loss. They could just take it back in the next round. As for the current round, they would not waste any more resources on it, because it was already destined to be a futile effort. What was the point of wasting that effort and resources? The two of them had actually already decided to give up in their hearts. However, Chu Yang appeared out of nowhere at this time and said so rudely, "Even if it's a futile effort, we have to try hard. If we can reduce the harm by a little bit, it's a little bit." This sentence did not have any aura or sharpness, but it showed the most primitive and fundamental persistence as a human. When facing an enemy that was too strong and could not be matched at all, so what? It was just a battle. Even if they knew that they would die, even if they knew that they would lose, so what? They could only fight. Demons wreaked havoc on the human world, and the human world withered. Even if they knew that there was little hope, they still had to try hard. Even if they could not reverse the situation and the outcome was already decided, they still had to try their best, do everything possible, use all their abilities, effort and efforts to reduce the degree of damage. That was all. Without Mo Tianji and Diwu Qingru, Chu Yang could still devise strategies. Without the two of them, Chu Yang could still win 1,000 miles away. Without a military advisor, Chu Yang was still Chu Yang. Otherwise, where would Minister Chu come from? Mo Tianji and Diwu Qingru's positions were military advisors. Wise men. But Chu Yang took care of both. I'm a wise man and a warrior. I can be a military advisor and a vanguard. I'm a marshal and a soldier at the same time. When facing an enemy, a warrior could only respond in a warrior's way. That was to fight. No matter what the final outcome was. The most important thing was to fight with all their might. Okay. Mo Tianji and Diwu Qingru said in unison. Since they had made up, there was no need to hesitate. There was no need to hesitate. Chu Yang made a prompt decision and decided on the next course of action. Originally, he planned to let the two think tanks come up with some ideas and formulate some targeted strategies. Chapter 1663. Thank you, Tribulation Sword Master, for saving our lives. The leading expert of the Yi clan was already covered in wounds. He looked at Chu Yang with a complicated gaze. These people were the members of the Yi clan, who had been stationed outside. More than 300 of them had rushed back. But there were less than 30 of them left after this battle. In fact, they would have become part of the pile of corpses by the riverside if Chu Yang hadn't arrived in time. In fact, none of them would have been spared more than 10 days ago. They received the order to rush back to deal with the Tribulation Sword Master. But this time, at the critical moment of life and death, they were saved by the Tribulation Sword Master. This was really although he already knew about the huge changes in this incident on the way here. When it really came down to it, he still had mixed feelings. You should go back quickly. If you see any corpses along the way, dispose of them if you can. Bury them if you can. Don't throw the corpses into the river. You must remember this. Chu Yang waved his hand and shot away without looking back. Along the way, they went through several fights. However, all the law enforcement officers immediately dispersed when they saw Chu Yang. They absolutely didn't want to fight with Chu Yang head-on. They changed places and continued to attack. As for those who didn't run away, or were caught by Chu Yang, they also went on their way. The road to the netherworld. Chu Yang had killed many law enforcement officers along the way. But in the face of the world, it was still a drop in the bucket. He was really at his wit's end. When he really did it, it was really troublesome. Unexpectedly, there was a gust of wind behind him. It was Wu Jueqing, his white robe fluttering in the air. Most of the corpses have been disposed of, but those that aren't in sight are beyond our reach. Wu Jueqing sighed. Such madness. The Dharma Supreme is definitely crazy. How could he do it? I really don't know what he's thinking. Chu Luer's face was pale. She bent over and vomited. She was still a little girl, although her talent and intelligence were far superior to ordinary people. When she saw so many corpses and had to deal with them personally, Chu Luer was already holding on. It would have been better if she hadn't seen Chu Yang. But, the moment she saw her brother here, a sense of dependence welled up in her heart. She couldn't suppress the feeling of disgust in her heart, and immediately vomited. Chu Yang patted Chu Luer's back considerately. At the same time, he said to Wu Jueqing, "But since things have already developed to this stage, we can only go with the flow. Senior Wu is a capable person, so I'll have to trouble you. Rob the world. This is something that cannot be shirked from in the first place. Even though it's already a thing of the past, my heart is still the same," said Wu Jueqing. "Just give me a quick death. It won't waste your time, and won't delay my journey." Smack! Yu Lingxue slapped him on the face and said furiously, "Why would that bastard make such a crazy decision? Why? Tell me." That person laughed and said, "Master Yu, the Dharma Supreme's orders are law in this world. No one can disobey. Whoever dares to disobey, we brothers will chop him up. Whatever the Dharma Supreme says we will do, not to mention killing a few people, even if it's to destroy this world. As long as the Dharma Supreme says it, there must be a reason. We will do it. There's no need for so many whys. Do we still need to repeatedly explain such a simple principle?" Yu Lingxue was so angry that he was trembling all over. He shouted hoarsely, "Nonsense, it's fine if you bastards kill people from big clans. But why do you even want to kill those innocent martial artists? It's fine if you kill them, but why do you have to leave corpses all over the place, and not even bother to clean up? Do you know what will become of this continent if this goes on?" He roared angrily. "Law enforcement officers have protected the world for 100,000 years. Do you intend to completely destroy it in these few days? What are your intentions? What are the Dharma Supreme's intentions? Don't you feel guilty for doing such a deranged and inhumane thing?" A hint of guilt flashed across that law enforcement officer's eyes for the first time. He said in a low voice, "Since the Dharma Supreme has arranged it, we will do so. As for the reason, there's no need to know. Master Yu's sincere and chivalrous advice is admirable. However, no matter how powerful you and Master Feng are, it's just the two of you. It's impossible for you to change the world's situation." He laughed loudly. "Since Master Yu has appeared, I no longer have any hopes of escaping. I might as well die here to appease the world." After saying that, he slapped his own head into smithereens. Blood flowed out of his 7 orifices on his distorted face, and he revealed a strange smile. "Master Yu, is there really right and wrong in this world?" Haha. Before he finished his last sentence, he was already dead. Gu Duxing asked coldly, "Who's in front?" Before he could finish his words, he had already arrived before Zhang Xian. "So it's you. I finally found you." Gu Duxing's black dragon sword lit up and he said sternly, "Dharma Supreme, revoke your ridiculous order." The Dharma Supreme's black robes fluttered in the wind. He looked at Gu Duxing with an extremely complicated expression before he retreated. It was just a glance. There was helplessness, envy and cold calmness. Gu Duxing roared, and the black dragon sword flashed fiercely. At this moment, the dazzling brightness of the sword light actually completely overshadowed the lightning in the sky, rushing towards the Dharma Supreme. The raindrops were stimulated by his aura and turned into sharp blades that could cut a human body. They all attacked together. In the midst of the sword light, the Dharma Supreme's face flashed indifferently. Gu Duxing clearly saw that the Dharma Supreme looked at him with a smile and approval. Then, as if the ground had shrunk, the Dharma Supreme quickly distanced himself from Gu Duxing's sword. The sword light was still flashing, but the Dharma Supreme retreated with his hands behind his back. In an instant, he was already 1,000 feet away. Gu Duxing came over on his sword with a thunderous momentum. Dharma Supreme, don't go, don't go. But the Dharma Supreme had already mysteriously disappeared in the rain, completely disappearing without a trace. Gu Duxing's sword moved horizontally, like a bolt of lightning giving chase. As a sword grade supreme, the speed of man and sword as one was definitely at the highest level in the world. But even with such astonishing speed, the Dharma Supreme's black figure could still be seen from afar at the very beginning. But after a while, it completely disappeared. Gu Duxing chased for a distance of 1,000 miles, but there was no trace of him at all. The surroundings were as silent as a ghost town. Gu Duxing stood in the rain, feeling a little lonely. The Dharma Supreme's current cultivation was actually much, much higher than his. This time, the Dharma Supreme did not attack him. He did not even have the intention to attack him. Then, what Mo Tianji said about the Dharma Supreme's mentality was basically something that was set in stone. Thinking about the look the Dharma Supreme gave him when he faced his sword light, that indescribable sense of envy, praise, and that complicated and pained expression, Gu Duxing did not know what to feel at this moment. He actually felt a little bitter and a little sad. He could not help but roar to the sky. I know what you mean. I understand how you feel. But what you are doing now, are you trying to destroy the everlasting reputation that you and your brothers have built? I know you want compensation. We all know you are upset. But even if you kill everyone in the world, will you be able to go back? Gu Duxing shouted, Dharma Supreme, I know you can hear me. Chapter 1665. The faces of Yi Chunshan and the others were as dark as still water. They couldn't contain their anger and anger. The law enforcement officers were really so ruthless? They didn't leave any leeway at all. When the sun had just risen, news came from their home. Their home had also fallen. Then, it was news of the Zhuge clan's fall. The Ling clan was also in an abnormal state of battle. They were in imminent danger and could collapse at any time. Dark clouds covered the entire sky of the continent, and murderous intent filled the air. The affairs of the world were unpredictable. In the entire continent, there was only the capital. Just a few days ago, it was still the most dangerous capital. But now, it had actually become the safest capital. In fact, this was not surprising. This gathering was where the most outstanding martial artists of the upper three heavens were gathered except for the big clans. Especially after a day and night of fighting, with the involvement of super experts such as Tribulation and Wu Jueqing and Moon Breeze. The martial artists who were gathered to participate in the Tianding Grand Meeting also took action one after another, gradually forming a tyrannical tide of resistance. The law enforcement officers' forces were defeated. In the late afternoon, after a sudden downpour, the law enforcers from the Du side vanished without a trace in an extremely short period of time. They weren't completely wiped out. Instead, they retreated collectively. Although the law enforcement officers had retreated from the capital, it was still impossible for the people in the capital to leave if they wanted to. After the law enforcement officers left the capital, they immediately went into hiding and lay in ambush in extremely secretive places. However, they still kept a close watch on the movements in the capital. They only allowed people to enter the capital, but they definitely didn't allow those who entered the capital to leave. For a moment, the capital had inexplicably become a forbidden area. No one was allowed to leave no matter which direction it was. In this period of time, because of the Tianding Grand Meeting, only a large number of people would enter, and very few people would leave. After such a lockdown, it seemed even more strict and crowded. Because at every moment, a large number of people who didn't know what was going on would enter. Or perhaps it could be described like this. At this moment, the capital, it had become a huge prison. There were people who could enter, but not people who could leave. The ancestor of the Chen family, Chen Yingfeng, broke out of the encirclement in the middle of the night. He wanted to go back to his family to take a look. However, at the border of the capital, he was intercepted by the high-level powerhouses of the law enforcement officers. However, everyone knew that this was only temporary stability for the Yi clan. After the enforcers had completely wiped out the other clans, that crazy spearhead would be directed at the capital. Once all their forces were gathered, the Yi clan's annihilation would be imminent. Even though everyone knew what was going on, they could not do anything about it. On the 5th day, the remnants of the Zhuge clan, who were closest to the capital, desperately broke through the siege and entered the capital. When Zhuge Zongqiong saw this, he immediately trembled all over and tears flowed down his face. He couldn't help but cry. The situation of this remnant force was really too tragic. The Zhuge clan had tens of thousands of years of foundation and tens of thousands of experts. But in the end, only a mere 73 people broke through the siege and arrived at the capital. Moreover, almost every one of them was riddled with injuries and looked haggard. Many of them were like skeletons. There were also 2 people who, after finally arriving at the capital, suddenly relaxed due to their serious injuries and actually fell into a deep sleep. A dream? What about the rest? Zhuge Zongqiong trembled and asked with a sliver of hope. More than 70 people knelt down and cried at the same time. Elder Master, the Zhuge clan is finished. Zhuge Zongqiong's face suddenly turned pale. With trembling lips he asked, could it be? The entire clan, men and women, old and young, are all wiped out. After the Zhuge clan's second-grade supreme martial artist said this, Zhuge Zongqiong's throat made a gurgling sound, as if he wanted to curse and howl. But in the end, he didn't say anything. His throat gurgled a few times, and his face suddenly flushed red. Then he fell backward stiffly. That very afternoon, the remnants of the Chen clan finally arrived at the capital. When Chen Yingfeng saw them, his body, which was already seriously injured, couldn't take it anymore. Without even asking, he fainted. Or rather, it was a little inappropriate to say that the Chen clan's remnants were the remnants, because only a total of 3 people escaped from the Chen clan's headquarters. 1 second-grade supreme martial artist and 2 8th-grade supreme martial artists. As for the rest, hundreds of thousands of people, just like the Zhuge clan, no one survived. The Chen clan, the mountains within a radius of thousands of miles, have completely sunk into a sea of fire. It's too tragic. It's really too tragic. The smell of barbecued human flesh can be smelled within a radius of thousands of miles. This is a blood feud, a blood feud. That second-grade supreme martial artist from the Chen clan had tears all over his face. He was on the verge of breaking down, barely able to support himself as he said these words. As for the other 2 8th-grade supreme martial artists, they were seriously injured and had traveled a long distance. Once they arrived, they fainted. Based on the fact that you killed all of our clan members, but not your clan members? Your family's women and children are women and children. But are my family's women and children all supreme martial artists? What exactly is the difference between you, Ling Muyang, and the Dharma Supreme? Or, Ling Muyang was almost driven mad by such unreasonable remarks. Moreover, there was no way he could defend himself. After a huge argument, he simply led his clansmen to the inn where the Tribulation Sword Master Chu Yang and the others were staying. He was so furious that his hair stood on end. If someone was so narrow-minded to this extent, and there were many people who were the same, then no matter what kind of misfortune this group of people would encounter in the end, they would really only have themselves to blame. Diwu Qingrou's words were definitely not referring to Chu Yang. Now, after the super clans were wiped out, everyone was bitterly regretting their past actions. Why did you all come earlier? At most, Chu Yang had the heavy pill. There was no medicine for regret. Even if there was medicine for regret, it probably wouldn't be given to this bunch of people. At this point, even though Di Wuqingru was disheartened, he could only choose to collect his emotions. He excused himself and returned to the Diwu clan to gather the defeated soldiers. In the future, he could only wait quietly for the moment when the final battle with the Dharma Supreme and the law enforcement officers came. At this time, there was really no need for any strategy. Besides, now that everyone had gone crazy, who could still calmly analyze what was going on? What was there to plan? Even if they still used him as a military advisor, what was the point of his orders being obeyed in public, but disobeyed in private? It was definitely impossible to be united again, because the people's hearts had already collapsed. People who were even jealous that their 10,000-year-old brother's clan was not wiped out. What else could he say? What else could he say? What else could he say? Strength. Now only strength is left. Just as Di Wuqingru walked out of the Yi clan, Chu Yang was in the inn, thinking about the comparison of strength between both parties. From the news brought back by Gu Duxing, Chu Yang could feel a sincere sense of oppression. As a sword-grade supreme martial artist, Gu Duxing's strength was definitely at the peak of the strongest in the heavenly layer. However, according to him, the Dharma Supreme's current strength was far above his. Also, when he fought with the Dharma Supreme previously, he was also far from being a match for the Dharma Supreme, which confirmed Gu Duxing's words. If he continued to deduce based on this, the final battle of the Tianding Grand Meeting, that the Dharma Supreme had mentioned earlier, would be somewhat dangerous for him and the others. The Dharma Supreme owed, and the Dharma Supreme felt guilty. The target was his big brother, his brothers, and it seemed to have nothing to do with him. Perhaps there would be a little bit of affection, but as the Dharma Supreme had said, when the time came, he would definitely not show mercy. Moreover, Chu Yang disdained the victory that was given to him by the enemy, and so did his brothers. Since things had already come to this, facing his brothers would be an unprecedentedly fierce battle. Therefore, the most urgent thing now was to improve their strength as much as possible. Their current strength was far from enough, and there were only a few days left.